to order the City Council regular meeting of the City of Wyoming, Minnesota, April 1st, 2025. Let the record reflect we do have a quorum. Member Luker, Member Onstad, Member Schilling, Member Yeager, and Mayor Iverson are present. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Open forum is next on our agenda. Open forum is an opportunity for members of the public to address the City Council on items that are or may not be on the current agenda. Items requiring council action may be deferred to staff or boards and commissions for research and future council agendas if appropriate. You will be limited to 3 minutes, and we ask that you conduct yourself in a professional, courteous manner and refrain from the use of profanity. Failure to abide by this policy may result in the loss of your privilege to speak. Do we have anybody here tonight that would like to speak at open forum? Okay, come on up, state your name and address for the record, please.
Chris Ortworth, 25730 Granford Avenue. I don't know, and maybe a lot of you guys know about it, but Vergis Memorial Park, they went in and did some tree trimming and totally demolished the trail. We have road restrictions on for groups like myself who do this every year. Just trying to understand, I mean, I know the asphalt wasn't that good, but why did we go in there and go over the asphalt? Why didn't we go over the grass? It's a lot easier to replace dirt and grass seed than to repave. So that was my main concern. Just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of it. They totally, and it's a majorly walked park. So totally destroyed all the asphalt completely.
Yep. I noticed that on my walk the other day.
Yeah, I mean, we all walked that area, but it was just kind of like, wow, and I don't know if you put a skid in there or what you put in there to do the tree trimming, but looking at the branches you trimmed, 3 to 4 inch diameter, we could have drug those out by hand.
I was wondering if that was actually from the road project. Were they using that as a stage, Mr. Reeves?
Not
Or
yet,
Mr.
not yet
Erickson?
at this point in the year, I don't believe, but
I can, and I'm not sure about the tree trimming, I'm not aware of that unless I know there was some trimming that was required. The contractor is gonna put new trails in this year and pave new trails, and so don't worry that, that's gonna remain that way, but, the contractor is responsible to put new trails in as part of the contract for that road improvement project that you're on. Mr. Reeves, I don't know if you know or not, but I know if the city did do some tree removal, there were some requirements. We talked about Public Works removing
Correct.
some branches in advance of the contractor coming in and doing that. It may have been that. Are you aware of that? Was that part of your crew's work that did some of the tree removals, or?
I'm not aware of that. I mean, it could have happened yesterday, I don't know.
This would have
No,
been
it's-
4 days ago now.
I would, at
So
least a
last
week.
week sometime.
Yeah,
So the tail end of last week.
Yeah, and somebody put up, the orange barricade signs on each end of the park.
yeah.
So I mean, I guess if I didn't know that was part of the paving project.
Yes.
So nowhere in any of the information that I got did I read that was part of that street improvement project. So that's more understandable, because the asphalt was getting bad, but
The asphalt was getting in really poor condition, and part of that was the contractor was gonna pave those trails. They didn't do it last year, and we wanted to make sure that any of the pruning, and I'm not sure if Rick coordinated that or not. I know you're not involved in every aspect of every piece of operation that they do, but certainly that was on the list for some tree clearing in advance of the paving, and they probably wanted to do that in advance of, certain times a year. You don't want to prune oak trees and things like that.
Right.
And so they may have just removed those here recently, is what I'm assuming is what happened, but the trails will be repaved here as part of that project.
and I guess the only reason why I bring it up, this is the second time I've been to city council to complain about property being destroyed by whoever. Before it was the drain that's got ripped out by the snowplows in the winter. Now it's the park at the end of winter. It just seems to be like a never-ending cycle here. We're in this little small area back there, and if this is happening there, where else is it happening in the city? And I just hope we'd be better stewards with our money and our city property. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do believe it was interesting that the barricades were up on both ends of that trail. So we're not talking little ones. We're talking those big signs that say "Do not enter or walk through here, so,
I'll look into this and get back to you on it.
okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll move on to number 1, approval of minutes. Consider approving the minutes of the regular meeting of the Wyoming, Minnesota City Council for March 18th, 2025. If there are no comments or questions, do we have a motion to approve? We have a motion to approve by Member Onstead. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Member Luker. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So approved. Consider approving the minutes of the work session of the Wyoming, Minnesota City Council for March 18th, 2025. If there are no comments or questions, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
We have a motion to approve by Member Schilling. Do we have a second by Member Onstad?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So approved. Consent agenda, items number 3, 4, 5, and 6 are on the agenda. Do we have any questions or comments or wish anything to be pulled?
Pool number 6, please.
We'll pull number 6. Are there any others? Seeing none, we need a motion to approve 3, 4, and 5. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Member Schilling. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Member Onstad. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So approved. Number 6, Minnesota Department of Health, MDH Radium Correspondence. Well, number 3. Member Yeager, what would you like to ask?
Oh, I see that the radium levels have dropped in well 3.
No, they went
They
down.
went
So
down
from
to-
2024, we could pump 4% of our total annual volume. For this year, they went up. We can now pump 22% of our total annual volume. So I think this is something we've continued to watch this well fluctuate, and we have sent that information to our engineer, to WSB, to continue to spotlight that, I guess, as far as that correlation. But yeah, it did go back up a little bit.
It went up a little bit since then?
Well, it went,
It was up there and now it went down.
The amount that we can pump.
Okay.
Yeah, the amount we
water
can pump is up,
So we can do,
is,
the radium went down, but we can now do 22%. Comparatively, last year it was 4%.
and do you have any idea why the radium has now gone down? Okay, and you wouldn't even know if that is a permanent occurrence, because that would be very nice if it was.
It would be fantastic, and we have, you may recall, we've presented on this before, and we've seen the fluctuations in that radium level over time, and so we've had corresponding amounts that we can pump and not pump from well number 3, and so we continue to operate. Public Works does not utilize that well at all, other than flushing and things of that nature, so it is in place. We want to reserve that capacity should we need it if one other well goes down, so that we can continue to operate and provide water to our users. But that is the method in which we're currently operating, is to not utilize that well at all, just in case of an emergency.
Okay, but I'm glad to see it went down.
Yes, it did go down.
Because
The amount
I've
we
had
can use it
people-
had gone up.
I've had people who were actually concerned about what the water quality and whatnot was. So-
Right, and so even though we can utilize it, like I said, we are choosing not to utilize it at all, unless there's an emergency.
Okay.
I think we have our consumer drinking report comes out here, and definitively it shows that our drinking water is safe, and it talks about some of the reasons why we can only pump that much out of that well, but rest assured to anyone in our public that our drinking water is very safe to drink.
Oh, I know, I did have a constituent that was asking very detailed questions, so.
Well, I know being up at the state capitol this last week and cities wanting some help with their water treatment plants, and the water that we saw was crazy. So we do have very good drinking water. All right,
Move to approve number 6.
thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second and a third. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So approved. Number 7, 8, 9, and 10 is acknowledge receipts of reports of officer boards, commissions, and department heads. I'd like to pull number 8, please. Does anybody wish to pull another report? Seeing none. Mr. Weck, I have a couple questions because my mind's trying to wrap around, you know how I am, I like to clear stuff off. So I keep seeing Fairview Hospital on here, phase 1, phase 3, and they've been on here for a while. Can you help me kind of understand what they're doing and then how they come up and how that phase works and?
Sure. So the hospital's operating, so the contractors have to find time to work, so usually at night, weekends, when they can work around staff. That's why they're taking so long. The one for the boiler project, in a normal situation, probably take maybe a week. I don't know how long it's gonna take, because they've gotta shut down parts of the hospital as they run a section of pipe, and then have me come inspect that, and as it works back through a couple hundred feet of office and exam room space.
Okay, so it's been a good couple of years, hasn't it? Feels like? Am I
Well,
just-
they've actually been doing a lot of remodeling.
They
so
have
they're-
been, okay.
Yeah.
So every time they go to do a remodel, then they're coming to us with the different phases, correct? And then you're taking a look at it and going and inspecting it?
Correct. Yep. They're bringing a new permit application, and then that gets reviewed and approved
Okay.
before the permit's issued. And then, yep.
Okay, thank you. I've just seen it on there a long time, so I wanted to kind of be clear with how that all works. So fabulous, thank you. Seeing there are no other reports, we'll move on to new business. Number 11, to consider hiring Logan Strand for the police officer position with a tentative start date of April 7th, 2025. Chief Bauer, is that you tonight?
That is,
Yes,
thank you.
It's the mic that's over
Yep,
there, right?
Sorry. Mayor, and members of council, looking to bring on Logan Strand as a police officer. He was the individual that we had selected last year for the IC Poet grant. We received $50,000 grant from the state, to pay for his tuition and all related expenses, and also his salary to attend law enforcement training at Hennepin Tech. He started that last fall and recently completed that mid-March. So he completed the education and took the state licensing exam, I believe the next day or the day after. He was very eager to get that done and successfully completed that licensing exam. As you know, the idea here was that the state put this grant out to take college graduates that are in a different field and train them to take the education requirements, take the exam to become officers. And we did participate in that program and used just short of $50,000 of the grant to complete that process. We're looking to add him as a police officer in anticipation of retirements in 2025. We did add additional funding in our budget request for this year in anticipation of this program, understanding that we were going to need to fund him temporarily until the retirements went into effect. So looking at bringing him in at $37.72 an hour. This is the introductory starting rate in the collective bargaining unit for the city for police officers. And with a hire date of April 7th, and looking to get him started on that date to transition him into that police officer position. If there's any questions.
Okay, we'll start with Member Lugar.
I have no questions.
Okay, Member Yeager.
When do you anticipate the retirement? Your police report said July?
Yes, that's accurate.
Okay.
Okay, Member Schilling.
I thought when you had said different degrees, because I saw he has a bachelor's degree in water resources, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that'd be kind of helpful in another aspect, right?
It is really cool. The people that we had come in with applications, it was an incredible group of people that I
Yeah.
wish I could have hired 4 of them, honestly.
Yeah, that's a
So, very cool
background.
program.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Member Onstad.
Seeing that he's been a cadet with the city, working in the city, will his training period, field training, be shorter? Or will it be the same as, is that
We
a
always,
standard?
yeah, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. We usually schedule it for the full extent. If, as things are moving along, we're able to cut some off the end, we're able to do that. We've covered a lot of training material with him already. He's done hundreds of hours of ride-alongs, he's done training with us, he's done multiple use of force trainings with us. He's done a lot, so we're able to expedite some of that, but we just don't want to cut him short either. If he needs the experience, we want to make sure we provide that.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Chief Bauer, I noticed that Representative Reimer reached out to the city of Wyoming for the success that we've had on this program, and you for the city to continue to support it. If that goes through, do we see this possibly using this again? Should we need it?
You know, there's been another offering. I'm hoping that the state will continue to fund it. We just need to have a vacancy that we can plan for, because it is a 6, 7, 8 month, planning process in order to get them ready to go. And I don't want to create a situation where we have an additional person that we would not be able to continue their employment if I don't have someone leaving. So it's a long-term strategy. This is not a quick fix. So, yes.
Well, and I think that Representative Reimer reaching out to us, knowing how successful the program has been, speaks volumes.
Sure.
So, all right, I will make the first motion to consider hiring Logan Strand for the police officer position with a tentative start date of April 7, 2025. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Member Onstead. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So approved. Number 12, to consider an update to the City of Wyoming street assessment policy. Mr. Erickson or Mr. Linwood?
I will start with that, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor, members of council. This is kind of a continued discussion now in front of you tonight, the assessment policy. We had a work session on this a couple weeks ago where Mr. Erickson provided some background in regards to our road improvement, construction, and maintenance process. As part of that, we reviewed the assessment policy. That is the foundational document that we use to guide our consistent application and special assessments for our street improvements. What staff is recommending as an addition to that assessment policy is a new section titled mill and overlay. The mill and overlay process involves milling over the top layer of the existing bituminous on the street and replacing it with a new bituminous overlay. We do have new language in there that recognizes that mill and overlay is a necessary maintenance activity, and it goes through that, along with identifying that it would be similar to what we've done in the past, where the city pays the 80%, the lowest amount allowed by statute, and then the residential component would be 20%. We do have it identified in there to be the discretion of the city council, even though we mainly always use the unit method in residential areas. But potentially if we had a different use in a commercial area, so we would, the unit or front foot, it'd be the alternate method would be approval by the city council. And I think one component that's important to it, that basically once that language includes a provision that if that individual lot were to be assessed, they could not be reassessed for a period of 10 years. So staff is recommending to council that we approve that section of the Wyoming assessment policy as presented tonight.
Mr. Linwood, we have a policy with complete street reconstruction for paying it off, 15 years typically, up to us, right?
10 to 15
10 to
has been our
15,
normal.
depending on the amount. So with this, can they pay it off sooner? I mean, it wouldn't be in the 10 years, I'm assuming, with the amount, or?
We could, and I think that's something that we would discuss with council. Usually these projects are not as expensive as you would see on a full reconstruction project. So it might be something in regards to what that amount is, where we'd even look maybe 5 to 10 years on these, and that would be something that we could discuss with council, how they felt about that based on those amounts. But I know that later on tonight, Mr. Erickson will go through the feasibility report for that project, and that's a component that if that was authorized to accept that we would go through further down the line when we went through that assessment policy, or I shouldn't say policy, that process. We could look and see really what council felt about that, with the bid on that, the amount of that assessed amount based on those years that it was for.
Okay, so for tonight, this particular item, we're just talking about language, correct? And adopting this language.
Correct. This would just be for the addition within for this item, the addition in the existing assessment policy for that mill and overlay section.
Okay, great. Member Onstead, we're gonna start with you.
No questions.
Member Schilling?
I actually do not have any questions. Mr. Erickson in our work session answered all of mine, and they were addressed in the minutes, so.
Okay. Member Yeager?
Oh, I did have a few more from last time. I do have a concern that if we start assessing for maintenance projects, this particular type of maintenance project, will we be opening ourselves up to assess for other maintenance projects, expanding that to assess to other maintenance projects. I'm also concerned about a back-to-back assessment. If, let's say, the payback we discussed at the work session was 10 years, and so you just paid off your assessment, you're not assessed for 10 years, so when you pay off your assessment, you have paid, or, you know, your 10-year period is up, and then you could be immediately assessed for a road reconstruction if that was planned in the plans. Now, that concern could be addressed by making the assessment, the grace period, 20 years, as per Mr. Erickson's maps.
The payment life cycle?
Yeah,
drawing that showed
pavement
that.
life cycle pictures. You know, where if you got a mill and overlay, you wouldn't be getting a road reconstruction for about 20 years anyway, another 20 years after that. Wasn't that what, you had a 40-year life cycle?
Yeah, I did highlight that map, and I did indicate that, you know, those are under ideal circumstances, and there's a lot of variables that go into that.
Okay.
And our experience is that we probably wouldn't expect that mill and overlay would last that 20 years. As far as assessments, I think, you know, in my next presentation that we have regarding this road project, you know, the assessments for these are gonna be less than $2,000. You know, it's probably, even these larger lots, you know, is less than $2,000 assessment. So we would likely at least suggest in that 5 to 10 year and probably a 5-year assessment period. So that wouldn't necessarily be a back-to-back assessment, what we'd be looking at, or at least recommending.
Okay, it was 10 years last time, so I asked.
Understood, yeah, good point.
Okay, another concern I have, I mean, I haven't seen the latest pavement management study or the next 5-year CIP, so forgive me, I'm working on the old data. And even though I asked to see that. But based on the older data, there are at least 3 projects where the roads, where they're mill and overlay projects, but there are roads in those projects that are rated rated poor. And, you know, so you propose to do a mill and overlay rather than a reconstruction, which is gonna have to be done anyway because those roads are in poor condition. One example would be 259th. Another example, another project was Flint Trail, 277th, 267th, and then on the other side of the freeway where Evergreen and Esquire, where that's rated poor, and then again, just an overlay. I am not comfortable for assessing what I consider a Band-Aid to, you know, just get something done because they're gonna need to be reassessed anyway. They're gonna be reconstructed anyway, and then we'll be facing a higher assessment. So that's another concern. I'm also concerned, I believe at the last work session, we talked about cracks will start reflecting through before the assessment's paid off. I mean, to me, that doesn't look good. You should at least pay off the assessment before the cracks show. And so on this, I've been going back and forth until I wrote out my concerns. So unless there's some new information.
I think if I could, I think in regards to the question or the concern regarding maintenance on mill and overlay is a very common assessable practice in a lot of different cities, so there isn't really anything. And as far as opening up any potential other maintenance practice to assessments, I don't know what those would be, and by certainly no means are we entertaining that or have that on the table tonight for council. In regards to the back-to-back, I think we talked about that a little bit in regards that we don't know if these might be shorter than that 10-year component, you know, where we wouldn't look to have a road reconstruction in that. And we're trying to be strategic with this, and also it's from my financial capacity for the council and for the city. If we had the ability to do these roads all at once and all in the same swoop, we certainly would. The city takes on the brunt for these road construction projects here. The city of Wyoming, we do the state statute minimum. The city pays for 80%. The residents or commercial businesses pay for 20%. There are cities that have it the other way around, where the city pays for 20% and the residents pay for 80% of it. Certainly, we could do a lot more roads that way, but that is not, and I'm not by any means saying that we should. I think the way that we do it is a very fair way, and we try to be as responsible as we can to those residents. I think in regards to the CIP, I don't really think that's relevant for the addition to this. This is a framework. This is establishing a framework of the policy tonight. that really shouldn't come into the consideration how many potential mill and overlays. Mill and overlays are gonna be something we'll utilize through the duration of our street life, whether it's 3 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now. So that's just an addition for transparency to our policy and utilizing another tool in the tool shed to take care of our streets and try to take care of them at a faster pace.
Okay.
The cracks, that is a potential on that. You can sometimes, like, as I think Mr. Erickson said, see 5 to 7 years, we start to see some of those cracks reflect through. That is part of, I guess, a mill and overlay. I don't really know if there's much from an engineering standpoint to do about that.
No, I mean, even our new roads, certainly will have cracks in them before assessments are paid off. It just, and you know, right? I mean,
Yeah, I've been
happens,
walking down it
right? Yeah,
and observing.
Right. And, you know, as far as, you know, the CIP, and that is something that we will be suggesting our spring road tour, followed by a work session to discuss the very CIP that you're talking about. And we want to make sure that we're not going ahead and, you know, developing a CIP short of having that road tour with the city council, highlighting a number of things, understanding what our assessment policy is, and how, I think we have a good idea of what our framework is for finances now. We've worked with our financial planner, and so I think that is an upcoming work session that we want to go through in a lot of detail with council and identify these future road improvements. And we talked about the next project, right? Hopefully being that Thornbeck project is one that we've all identified, trying to get ahead of that. That project will have more than just one type of construction, right? And so it'll have the full depth pavement removal and replacement, and then some of it will hopefully have a mill and overlay, right? Where we can eliminate a lot of these distresses that we see that are more superficial. There are full depth cracks that go through the pavement that will eventually reflect through, but a lot of that shallow potholes, we want to make sure we address and get rid of that material and then put an overlay on that. And so we do think that that will be likely potentially the same project where we may have, potentially, we'd assess everybody either different rates, one for the amount that's a full depth and another for a mill and overlay, or if you elect not to move forward with the mill and overlay assessments, it would be assessing some, you know, a full assessment for the full depth replacement and others nothing. So I just, that might create some concern with residents during that type of project setup too. That just want to make sure you're aware that, you know, we could always break them off and do them separate projects, but I think people would ultimately understand that there might be some disparity there.
Okay, I have another question. We, a couple of years ago, we put in franchise fees earmarked for road reconstruction, road projects. How much are we making on those?
About the same, still around $300,000
Okay.
a year annually, and those go right into our road fund and are utilized towards these projects.
Okay, and as for the relevancy of the CIP, when I'm sitting reading the packet, making a decision, I think I know best what I think I need for relevant, what I need and what I consider relevant to make my own decision. And I appreciate what you're saying, but
And that's fine, that's
You know,
your
you don't-
opinion, I'm just saying that you're trying to approve the framework tonight, not a schedule. That was the point I was making.
no, but my point, as I made in the work session, was that I would like the information to give myself more data and to be better informed to make a decision.
Is there anything else?
No, that's it.
Member Luger?
Sure, thank you. I have a couple of questions. Mr. Erickson, the information that you provide on roads, construction, like whether it's projects, whether it's regarding this, I am consistently impressed by the detailed information and the why behind different mechanisms and actions. I'm wondering if the presentation from last week, because I haven't looked, if it is available on the website anywhere. Because, and I will say this as, you know, even as a council member, it's hard to appreciate how these projects and how policies are created without having all of that information in front of you. It is really detailed, and there is a lot of moving pieces that you capture really well. And so I think if it's there, awesome, and because I think it would be really helpful for our residents to know and have more detailed information about what we do. The second question that I had is, and we talk about this, I think every time we talk about streets, Mr. Erickson, can you talk to us a little bit about why cracks start to show on new roads.
Yeah.
And is this common across Minnesota?
It is common, unfortunately, right? We have extreme weather patterns, right? From really cold, -40 to 105-degree temperatures, right? And so the pavements aren't made to, or we'd love for them to be designed to that, to the ability to move and expand and contract. But when they do, you have these large masses, and you see it with, I think the mayor brought up the last meeting with concrete, right? You see these pavements buckle on highways, and so we do see that here. You see these transverse cracks, and they're thermal cracks, right? And so you see these extreme temperature changes, and pavements just don't move like the temperatures like we have in the ambient world here. So those types of things we see, they are common. It is unfortunate. There's many reasons for distresses in roadways. That is one of them, but those are those transverse cracks that we see, every, spacing, right? A lot of times there's even engineered calculations to determine, in some cases we've done this, right, where we've done saw cuts where the cracks are generally going to form so that they're straight lines. We can fill them with joint sealant in advance and allow them to crack and move without them cracking diagonally or zigzagging across the roadway. And so those things, are the reason we do those is to prevent them from doing that. So yes, it is common. It is unfortunate. We hate it. But yes, they will continue to deteriorate from the day we put them in.
Thank you. I have just one more question regarding use of mill and overlay. In creating this policy, as well as kind of the criteria by which that we use to determine what is a candidate for a mill and overlay. Mr. Erickson, I know you work with a few cities. Can you tell us whether this is our policy and criteria fairly consistent, like with peer cities of like comparable populations?
Yeah, so there
area?
is some a variety. Some communities don't assess for any project whatsoever, right? And so those are communities that have things set up and structured in a different way, and not to say it's right or wrong, but we assess. And most of the communities that I have ever worked in all assess. I've not had the fortune of working with a community that doesn't assess. But every community that I've ever worked in, and I'd say the majority of communities that we represent in the metro area all assess. It is, I would say, as Mr. Linwood indicated, we assess 20%, which is the minimum we can assess based on state statute when we're, for instance, bonding for improvements. It's a requirement. Was there another part of the question that I feel like I'm missing something?
Criteria for how we decide
criteria
mill and
for-
overlay versus
Yeah, so-
something a little bit more in depth.
Right, so as far as the criteria, we do evaluate the road conditions, we do the road ratings, and so it's above and beyond just looking at the actual physical number, because we can see a lot of distresses in the pavement, and they might just be superficial, that when we grind off that top layer of pavement, for instance, like this project here, a lot of them are really shallow potholes that we can remove all of that material. They're not full depth distresses. And so that is part of that evaluation. We need to look at it, look at their score to start out with, but then physical observation, both public works staff and engineering staff to evaluate, is this gonna be a successful project where we can mill and overlay? And then we also do cores to ensure that we have adequate pavement there to remove the top layer and still have structure there for the paving equipment or the milling machine to travel over it without breaking things up.
Thank you.
I'm gonna follow up with that question, with another question. So, human nature, human eyes can make mistakes, but if I remember correctly, WSB uses AI now on our roads assessments?
Yeah, so the equipment that we utilize is a truck-mounted camera, and it does map all the distresses, so you can actually go back and look, and it'll highlight all the cracks, all the distresses. And so when we do this, in 3 years, right, we can see the progression of the cracks, and we can kind of predict and identify how fast these roadways are deteriorating and try to develop a capital improvements plan based on that. Now, in the situation we're in currently, it's a little bit more reactive, right, because we are a little bit behind. We have some roadways that are deteriorated pretty far along, and we have a lot of roads to fix. And so it's less predicting when we're going to do it more, a little bit triaging the situation that we're in. I think we've done a really good job to date. We still have work to do, but yeah, the equipment and the analytics behind that with the AI is certainly a huge improvement. It takes out a lot of the human error, and it still needs to be validated and verified, but certainly more tracked rather than a photo. It actually maps everything as well, so it's really unbelievable information to have.
So if we could just get the pavement material to last a lot longer, if they
Oh,
could
it'd be
just figure
great.
that out.
And they're continually working on it. You can see Min Road up there near Monticello,
Yeah.
and they got all kinds of different pavement sections, and a lot of research goes into this, and we do follow the latest and greatest that MnDOT has to offer with their research, and really utilizing industry-wide standards for all of our materials and specifications and testing requirements.
Okay, and a question did come up regarding life cycle. So, with the life cycle, again, that's something that, over the years, you've worked in how many different cities, you've worked with us for how long? Our first road was 2015 or 2014 that we started the long, 57, 62 miles of road trying to reconstruct over the years, correct?
Right.
Okay, so with that life cycle, I think we went over this, but we can't control Mother Nature. We can't control weather and all that kind of stuff. So you've got this model, but it's not a definite, correct? We can't pinpoint exactly X amount of years.
Correct, yeah, I mean, and just very generalities, right? We look at it at 20 years in, we look at a mill and overlay to get it to that 30. Gosh, it would be great if it'd be 40, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a lot of variables there. A lot of our roadways don't have adequate drainage, right? That's an impact or an impediment to long-lasting roadways as well. And we've, certainly we could build our roadways to a much higher standard, but it also comes with a much higher cost. And so there's a lot of balancing there that we look at and try to get our best bang for our buck.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Mr. Linwood, we, this council in particular, I believe we were the first ones to put away money or to be able to help ease some of this burden for the roads.
There was some planning, I think, that began in 2012, 13 in that for the street improvement project, but has been, I think, a higher emphasis on our 5-year CIP and planning throughout now through how we have a little more finite on the maintenance component and the long-term reconstruction, and then things like mill and overlays that we've worked and continue to work on over the last 5 to 8 years on our CIP.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So again, we're talking about language that is gonna go into our assessment policy. So I'm gonna read, if there are no other questions.
I actually just wanted to
Sure.
ask a couple questions. A couple of them got answered, but
Did I forget you?
no, you did not. I
Okay.
actually
I was
did
gonna
not
say,
have any
sorry if I
questions
did.
because you
Okay.
answered them, but then the more questions that
Yeah.
came up. So I just wanted to say something. Obviously, engineering and road construction is not my expertise by any way, shape, or form. But I do know one thing, okay? I live in Thurnbeck on Forest Boulevard. I think our road is like 25 or 26 years old. Prior to that, the city did no planning, none, zero for roads, as long as we've lived here, and now that's starting. And as Mr. Erickson stated, once we get caught up, that is gonna change this, in my mind, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but once we are caught up and we are on a regular maintenance schedule with our roads and infrastructure, that eases that burden, if you actually look at it. The cities that have kept up with their infrastructures, their costs are down. If you actually look at this, and you're gonna correct me if I'm wrong, but I do truly believe that once we get caught up on something that was ignored since the city was founded, in my opinion, it was just never a priority, and we know why. But I believe that with our long-term planning and the things that we are doing as a council, once we get this caught up, we will be on those basic maintenances, those mill and overlays that are gonna make these roads last a lot longer than the normal anticipated, because my road will be the example of that, as you stated. We're gonna have a full reconstruct I already know it's in the front part, I go in and out of it every day. And then down where I live, it'll be a mill and overlay, but 26 years before we even attempted that. I mean, it's in pretty good shape, and some of it, the beginning is the most of the traffic, so it gets beat up. But I just feel that with our planning and the things we are doing, this will help bring that financial burden down, because we will be caught up. We have 67 miles of roads. Once those things are all checked off and we're in a regular schedule with reconstruct and mill and overlay and sealing, and I think that is something that, it is a positive direction I do believe that we are going in. And I kinda got off track there, so. But if I'm not mistaken, if we get caught up, it does reduce that financial burden as we plan for long, 5-10 year planning, so.
Agreed.
That's it.
Okay, all right, so we need a motion to approve the update to the City of Wyoming street assessment policy. Do we have a motion to update?
So moved.
We have a motion to update by member Onstad. Do we have a second by member Luker?
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
So approved. Number 13, to consider resolution 250429, a resolution receiving the feasibility report and setting the public hearing for the 2025 street improvement project. Mr. Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Again, this is just a summary of the feasibility study that had been completed and requested or authorized by the city council. And so we're not asking for any action tonight as far as moving forward the project, but it's really receiving that feasibility study, and if you're inclined to do so, then set that public hearing where we inform the public of the project. So our project location that had been identified is shown in red, and it consists of the Hawk Meadows neighborhood. It includes 258th Street, Grail Court, Grand Prix Court, Grizzly Court, and Greenwood Court. It is adjacent to our 2024 improvement project, so we talked about trying to group these neighborhoods together and have similar pavement lives in similar areas. Our project schedule, again, the study was authorized or ordered in February of 2025. We have the feasibility study here this evening. We are looking to schedule a neighborhood informational meeting. Now, sometimes we do that in advance of the feasibility study to make sure that we include public feedback on what should be included in the project. This is a pretty straightforward project with just being a mill and overlay. There are a couple of drainage improvements that we'll include, but we've held off on that because we weren't sure where we're gonna land at with the assessment policy. And so now that we have that information, we are proposing to hold that informational meeting April 16th. And if you're inclined to approve that and authorize that this evening, we'll send that out in the mail yet this week for notification. That public hearing would be scheduled for that first meeting in May, so it takes a little while to get that public notice out in the paper and meet the statutory timeline requirements. And so it would be a month out, so it would be that May 6th meeting. We feel we can turn these plans around very quickly, and we need to really to make sure that we can expedite and get construction underway this construction season. So we'd bring that back likely to the May 20th City Council meeting. At that point, we'd ask for you to authorize or approve the plan specifications and authorize the advertisement for bids. And then you can see the rest of the schedule, receiving bids later in June and potentially awarding a contract at that first meeting in July, and, construction late summer. It would not take real long for this project. It's probably a few week project is all. It's just milling off the material and paving it. So there's a little bit of curb repairs and things like that we're proposing, but for the most part, a pretty straightforward project and culminating in the assessment hearing in the fall of 2025.
Okay, thank you. Questions, we'll start with member Luger.
No questions.
I do have a few more slides.
Oh,
if I may.
sorry, I'm just like
I'm
on
sorry.
autopilot,
Wait, well, I
right?
take it back then.
No
I-
questions for you yet.
Maybe you'll change your mind.
So as we've talked about this quite a bit here, but we have aggressively undertaken many road improvement projects over the last decade. We've talked about our road ratings and our typical process with council and staff road tours and public works feedback, and so we're continuing to work on that. This rose to the highest priority based on a number of those factors, both condition, trying to expedite this project so that we don't lose it to a full reconstruction and can save some money while getting this roadway hopefully into much better condition that will last at least, we're hoping at least 10 years. We're hearing 7 to 10 is what Rob's hearing amongst his administrator groups, but we feel pretty good about the project lasting that 10-year minimum lifetime. Minor drainage issues have been identified, pretty minor, but there's been some standing water in a couple of intersections that we think we can carry through with a concrete valley gutter through the intersection and get that to drain out better. And so looking to, also make improvements rather than just resurfacing. So existing conditions, just wanted to quick highlight, you can see the potholes in the roadway, the patching, a lot of skin patching just to cover up these real shallow potholes that have formed following some chip seals. And so we feel real good about doing a mill and overlay. We did get cores back. You can see the condition here, right? It's just a ton of shallow potholes. They're not full depth, and so we feel like we can mill that surface off and get another good driving surface on that. We're gonna do some additional cores prior to final design if you're inclined to, again, move forward with the project. Some of the cores on 264th Street, the main drag there, were a little bit thinner than we would have liked, right? They're, in that a lot of them are 4 inches, but there's some that are 3 inches, and that's getting borderline that we can do a mill and overlay. There may be some areas that we have to do full depth replacement of pavement, and so we just want to narrow that down a little bit. So we might do a little bit more cores, but I just wanted to temper that's kind of what we're seeing with the bores that we just got, the corings that we just got the results on. Mill and overlay, you can kind of see the operation. It's a piece of equipment that walks down the roadway, grinds off that top layer of surface, and the lower photos, again, just a paving crew replacing that top layer of pavement.
Mr. Erickson, is that full width? So it's not the machinery used, is it full width of the road, not half?
Yeah,
so there's a line?
Yeah, so there is, you can see on the top, it actually is a mill. It will not take the full width of the roadway, so it'll come off in one pass. And then in the paving on the bottom of the screen, you can see is half of the roadway. They typically don't have a break in it where they can put a crown in the roadway, so they pave the first half, then they come back and pave the second half.
Okay.
So there is a seam down the roadway, and you'll see on highways, all roadways, that's the weak point in the roadway is where that joint is, and there's hard to get that density at that joint, because when you're compacting the second layer, you oftentimes will ride on the other compacted layer, and so it's a little bit harder to get that longitudinal joint density. We do inspect, we do make sure that they do that. We've talked a little bit about some of the different testing criteria that we go through, and so that is something that we do keep an eye on, but it is something that there is a joint down the center of the roadway always.
So there is no machinery currently, somebody needs to design this, that would be a full road without having to do that joint?
They need a crown.
Right, so
You
there
do, 'cause-
are
so the
some,
water's
there
flowing
are,
down.
there
Got
are
it.
some that are, in most cases, you do not see that.
Okay.
And a lot of times is, these roadways still remain open to traffic, and so
Yeah.
you simply can't.
You
get
can't do that,
equipment
okay,
by it,
that makes
so.
sense, okay.
Including their trucks that deliver the material, right, go
Yeah.
alongside it, come in, back in,
makes
dump it
sense.
in. We did also talk about trail. There is a trail along 256th Street.
Yeah.
That pavement is just as old as everything else that's out there, right? And so we did include costs in our feasibility study to identify that and replace that pavement. That's a separate cost. It's not accessible cost.
Yep.
And so we just, we feel like if we're gonna do that, now is the time to do it while we have a crew there, rather than come back in separately with a coming in to pave the trail at a different time, so.
Yep.
Next slide. This is just a typical section that identifies our roadway, the width of the roadway. We're identifying a 2-inch mill. We'll look at that again more closely with our cores to determine what we want to do is take that full top layer off. It's placed in 2 layers, and we want to take just slightly more than that first layer off, so we got all that bad material off and repave. And so again, we're going to get a few more cores out there to kind of nail down the area where we feel there may be some deficient pavement out there to do a mill and overlay, but hopefully we can mill and overlay everything. Again, similar, this is the first slide there, which showed the trail on the roadway. All of the other cul-de-sacs do not have a trail, so it's specifically along there. So again, just a typical section showing the milling and the replacement of the pavement. Our project funding, again, per our assessment policy, as approved this evening for mill and overlays, like all our other projects, is 20% of the project costs are assessed. The remaining 80% is funded by the city. The assessments do not include the trail construction. That is not an assessable cost based on our assessment policy. Assessments are based on the unit rather than front footage in most cases. commercial properties is one exception, but for neighborhoods like this, it's always based on the unit. Whether you have a 100-foot lot or a 105-foot lot, the use of the roadway, the benefit is generally uniform. And so we have determined many years ago to go with a unit assessment. Next slide. These are all the parcels adjacent to the roadway. There are a couple of parcels that you see close to 255th Street that do not have assessments, and that's because we don't assess corner lots more than one unit. And so they were assessed with the 2024 street improvement project, or will be assessed with the 2024 street improvement project. So all other parcels, including the city parcel, is identified. There's a city parcel there that we're also proposing be assessed, just consistent with everybody else. And so we do have a total of 52 assessable units. We have a total assessable amount of $88,540, resulting in an assessment per unit of $1,703. Again, this is just an estimate. We'll actually base it on actual costs, but that's where this project had fallen in the feasibility study. We're all familiar, but we'll go through in a lot of detail for property owners. The assessment process follows state statute chapter 429. There's an opportunity for property owners to object to their assessment, and we include that in the mailed notice prior to the assessment hearing. But they would need to provide written objection appealing the assessment and signed and provided to the city prior to or at that assessment hearing, and that appeal would need to be filed within 30 days with Chisago County. Interest rate is set at the time of the assessment certification. One of the upcoming slides here will quick identify where we've fallen with that interest rate. Again, a project here where we're under $2,000 in assessments. Staff would propose either a 5 or a 10-year assessment rather than certainly a 15-year. We're looking at a 5-year assessment. You know, it probably is manageable, I would think, but something that we don't need to decide today, something that we'll share as part of our presentation. The public always has the ability to prepay without interest within 30 days of the assessment hearing, so they can pay that amount in full and not worry about it being applied to their property taxes. Past years, the assessment percentage rate of interest was 4 to 5.25. So it has ranged, and that is, Mr. Linwood, do you want to quick highlight how we arrive at that?
Usually based off a 10-year treasury bond, and what we've always done is done about 1.5 to 2% above the true interest cost of that. That's usually what most municipalities do.
Thank you.
And that additional is to help offset costs in terms of administrative costs?
Correct.
Correct. Sorry.
And so, again, property owners have the ability to prepay their assessment before it gets applied and certified with Chisago County to be applied to your property taxes. Or if that is not done, then it does get certified with the county for being applied to the property taxes. This is really just a flow chart of that public improvement process, that 429 improvement process. We're very early on in that stage, but I just want to show graphically that it is a process that we follow. We do add additional public engagement opportunities for the public above and beyond what's required. We find that it is certainly helpful, and property owners appreciate that additional engagement and in information. So with that, I'll stand for any questions that you have, and if you don't have any, again, we are recommending that you receive the feasibility study and set that public hearing.
Okay, let's start with Member Luger.
Still
Any
no
more
que-
questions?
still no questions.
All right. Member Schilling.
Statements, no questions.
Okay, Member Yeager.
No questions.
Member Onstad.
Just one question. Going from community to community, neighborhood to neighborhood, I'm guessing that the roads are different qualities over the years, different contractors, different standards. Are we trying to go back, now that we're doing a kind of a complete overhaul of all the roads and cities, to have a consistent roadway throughout the city?
Yeah, so right now, with all new development, and I think that's a little bit different than the question you asked, but all new development has a set standard and set section of roadway that we do require, and it is far superior to anything that was built, 26 years ago, 28 years ago. That we have a lot of those roads constructed in the 80s, 90s, and so we've had that standard consistent for some time now, and so we're really good and happy with that. When we get to reconstruction projects also, we have some roadways that are state aid roadways, and those have to meet state aid design standards. And so that means certain widths of roadways are required, vertical and horizontal curves, but also pavement design. And so our pavement design is uniform for all new projects that we have. There are differences though when we look at like this project, right? It's just a mill and overlay, so it's just removing the surface pavement and putting it back. And so it doesn't necessarily meet state aid design for width, for instance, right? We're not changing the curb width, we're not changing anything like that, but we do try to maximize and maintain as much consistency as we can, certainly with all materials, but as far as the depth of our full section, we're not proposing to correct that to make it consistent with what our current design standards are, because we're just looking at a mill and overlay.
I would think that would help in future generations when they have to replace them far down the road.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And so, we talked a little bit about this project, and the cul-de-sacs are all, showing 4 inches of pavement. There's a few of the cores that we had were 3 inches of pavement on 256th Street. And so certainly now, right, we're looking at all our new developments are far greater depth in section of the roadway for support. And we're not done with that either. I mean, we've talked about making some modifications to that as well. And so certainly we want to make sure that when we get a roadway, it's going to last for a long time. And so continue to look in ways to improve that as well, without creating undue expense for developers as well.
Thank you.
Okay, I just have one statement. I'm doing the happy dance over the trail and the ADA compliant width of the trail. It's been super important to make sure as generations come that we have walkability in our city. So,
Right. So none of it is currently meeting any ADA standards, and so
Correct.
we're looking to add ped ramps and all of those
Yeah.
things while we're there, which is something that we should do while we're there.
yeah, super important to have that done so people can move safely. So we need a motion to approve Resolution 250429, a resolution receiving the feasibility report and setting the public hearing for the 2025 street improvement project. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion to approve by member Onstad, and we have a second by member Luger. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So approved. Number 14, to discuss the Audubon Society property located near Hawk Meadows. Mr. Erickson, no, Mr. Linwood?
Yes.
This is you? Okay,
Yes.
it wasn't, okay.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. This tonight is something that just recently came to the attention of our city staff. As you may be familiar with, over by Hawk Meadows, we have the Hawk Meadows Trail area, which is actually currently owned by the Audubon Association, or excuse me, Audubon Society. They're a nonprofit that was established in 1905, but they're committed to protecting birds and natural environments that they rely on. As part of the development there in Hawk Meadows in 1996, there's 66 acres of area located in that area, as we call the Hawk Meadows open space. There is, for the large majority of it, it is all just wetland. There is a small component though that is made up of a small walking trail that sometimes when we have very, very wet weather can sometimes be challenging to walk in certain areas of it, but I've attached on this item, there's a couple different aerial views of the property with the overall, including another picture showing that trail area within there. We recently met with the Audubon Society, and they have essentially said that they're no longer in a position to own or manage this piece of land, and they would like to formally donate it. But as form of that donation, the property would need to remain in its natural state and be dedicated as public parkland if the city were to take it. They think basically us, or potentially something we talked about, the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District, would be the most appropriate and responsible future stewards of the land. We would like to discuss with council tonight some of the different components of this regarding transfer of the property. This is initial, we don't have to make any final decisions tonight, but we have, at a quarterly meeting that we had with the watershed, we did express to them that this is something that we're gonna take to our city council and like to have some initial discussions about the city potentially being a steward of the land. It also was brought up, like I said, during those discussions, that perhaps the watershed would also be a good steward of the land. They do a lot of work within water quality projects, invasive species, things like that. So they also, based on that, the Audubon would want to keep this land in its natural preserve state. That being said, we'd just like to start some initial conversations with council. I know that the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District, I did talk to one of their staff members, and that it sounds like the board has met, and I know that Chair Anderson is with us tonight as well, but they would definitively be interested in the property if the city were to not look at it and just take it as a dedicated parkland, so they would be interested. That is certain, but like I said, we wanted to at least start with a conversation with council tonight, and then if we need further conversations between ourselves and the Audubon and the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District, we certainly can do that, but that is where it stands right now. And yeah, so I can stand for any questions or thoughts, direction, etc.
I'll start with a question. I believe we've been working on that trail, correct? Our staff goes out there and takes care of the trail.
There is, and I think I'll speak with Mr. Reeves, please tell me. I think there's minimal maintenance that goes on out there. There is some mowing of that trail to keep it up and not have the grass become overgrown. I think that maybe happens a couple times a year, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. Also, there is, usually we do try to keep some sort of grooming out there because it's basically in the wintertime for when there is snow events. So essentially it can be utilized for walking, snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, just to keep that state. So there is also some times when Public Works will go out there and do some of that. Right now the maintenance is fairly nominal, but there is some.
Okay, so if the watershed district decide to, that we gave it to them, I would like to see the trail to continue. I think that's super important, especially in the winter time too, because otherwise, summer, it's a little buggy, it's a little wet, but in the winter time to be able to get out and walk that path. So for me personally, I wouldn't mind if it got donated to us or we gave it to Watershed, but it's super important to me to make sure there's still some type of trail with that. And then deciding who's going to be taking care of that trail. So that's me personally. Let's start with Member Schilling for any other questions.
I really don't have any questions. If I read it correctly, we've already done partial maintenance of it anyway. It's not gonna be something that's ever gonna be developed. It is a wetland. You're not gonna touch it, so I have no objections to either or, so.
Okay. Member Yeager?
Well, I wouldn't mind seeing the watershed district take it over, provided that the trail is still there.
Okay. Member Luker?
No questions at this time.
Okay. Member Onstad?
Just a comment that whoever takes it over, I hope that the transfer is invisible to the public that use that nothing changes that. I use it quite a bit, and it's a nice trail, summer or winter, and I hope that it just stays as is, whoever does take it over.
Thank you. Mr. Linwood, seeing that this was just a discussion, are you gonna go back and, you don't need a formal motion, correct? Are you gonna go back and and kind of bring back what we've talked about, both to the Audubon Society and also the,
Certainly, I think that was the Audubon. I think the Audubon, into some of the sentiment regarding the trail, that was one thing that the Audubon wanted to see it remain in its condition and keep operation of that trail, as I think that would be a condition of this, whether it went directly to the city or went to the city and then to the watershed, or went from the Audubon to the watershed, that trail would be, the natural area would be kept, that it would remain that trail in perpetuity as far as some sort of maintenance and usability for the public for that area, as I think there's a lot of people that are able to go back there and enjoy that. So that, I think that would definitively be on the table, that the trail would remain, and that the natural state of the property would remain. So I don't think that should be a concern. I think it'll be more in regards to if it were to be dedicated as parkland to the city, or if we work with the Audubon. The Audubon, I believe, is comfortable either way as long as the property remains. Like I said, the watershed might have a few more tools in the tool shed as far as doing some of those different characters, as far as the water improvement, things like that. Not to say if we owned it, we wouldn't let them do that, but it might be just simpler if they were the steward of that area.
so then a question for Mr. Lunan. What is the cleanest way to do it? If the Audubon gives it to us and then we state the conditions that we would like to keep it in before we give it to the watershed district? Or how does that work? I'm looking for down the road and other council members and other generations to make sure it stays the way it's intended to. So I'm guessing we need to put something in writing.
Yeah, I mean, probably the most secure way is you would do it, you would have a deed restriction on it that it remains undeveloped, but also with regards to the trail piece of it, we may want to record an easement, just to have that document in writing. I think right now everyone understands, everyone agrees, and we think it'll be maintained, but in order to guarantee, we would want to record that on the property to have that easement there in perpetuity. So that probably is the most secure way. Whether or not the easement for the trail is absolutely necessary is probably a discussion between the parties, but certainly you would just have the deed restriction, which I'm assuming the Autobahn would do anyway, so it's probably gonna be on there. It's more that trail piece to make sure that that's gonna be maintained. And the best way to do that would be just to probably have an easement recorded against the property.
And is there cost to that typically?
Yes.
Okay, and Mr. Linwood, would that be something that the park board would be able to take out of their funds to do that, or how does that work?
I think we'd have a conversation in regards to the parties involved in regards to that, if, you know, depending on how the transfer went, you know, working through with the Autobahn and the watershed, so we'd probably leave that up to some discussion in regards to how those costs would be potentially shared, or who would pay for the majority.
Okay, so there's no decision may be made today. You're gonna go back and take that feedback, and this will come back onto council again, correct? Yep, okay, all right. We'll move on to number 15, to consider a city council work session for April 15th, 2025. Mr. Linwood.
Thank you, Mayor. This is just a request for a council work session at our prior to our April 15th meeting. It'll be at 5:30. Staff would like to continue discussion regarding retail cannabis with the council. The state keeps updating and changing some things as council authorized for an application that is still within the pending state, but we're hoping that we'll have more updates for the council at the 15th, as that's what the state has indicated. So I'd just like to, like I said, continue that discussion.
Okay, has everybody checked their calendars?
It's tax day.
I know. How can we forget? You'll be out of town?
Give them the money.
Okay, but everybody else will be in town, so 5:30 works, and then the 7 o'clock council. All right, we need a motion to approve the city council work session on April 15th, 2025 at 5:30 PM here in council chambers. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
A motion by member Schilling, and I'll make the second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So approved. All right, we'll do council reports really quickly. We'll start with member Yeager.
Oh, no report. Thank you for coming. Thank you all for watching.
Member Schilling.
No report. Thank you for those that showed up and anybody watching. Have a great night.
Member Onstad.
No report, and it's nice to see a lot of people here.
Member Luger.
I have no report. Thank you for attending.
Did we attend sewer before the last meeting?
Yes, it was before last.
It was, okay. All right. I was trying to remember when that was. So previously, I did attend the Joint Sewer Commission meeting, the Planning Commission as well. And then I would like to thank Representative Max Reimer for asking us to come up and testify to the committee regarding our public safety building. Unfortunately, we had 2 minutes. That was the most intense, stressful 2 minutes, I think, of my life. But we really appreciate the time and the effort that Chief Fowler put into it, Mr. Linwood put into it, Representative Reimer as well. I think it went really well, and one of the chair actually commented on when they visited our tour 2 years ago, I think it was. I think it was last year, when they came and saw our building and said just how awful it was, and also commented on our donuts. So good job on that. All right, so with that, we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.